righty, the number one reason that a sovereign state would join a supranationalist organization in today's world is primarily based on trade. That's right, free trade. Everybody wants to trade more, make more money and more jack and more stuff going on. Absolutely. And what government doesn't want the peoples and businesses of its state to create more and work more and sell more and trade more and buy more and make more money? Yeah, awesome. I mean, every government pretty much spends most of its time thinking about how to make its economy grow and thrive and get bigger year after year after year. So it should come as no great shock that the international organizations based on trade are the ones that have really exploded in the last several decades. And by exploded, I mean there are more trade blocs than ever before, and there are also more states that have joined those trade blocs than ever before in human history. It's phenomenal. Many economists would actually look at the growth of free trade and the trade blocs and say, hey, that is one of the primary reasons why the economies of the member states and the world economy as a whole has grown in the last several decades. It's that big a deal. It's made that big impact, all because of this free trade concept. Okay, well, let's talk about that concept for just 1 second more. I mean, yeah, it's real tough stuff. You've heard about free trade a trillion times in a trillion different places. I'll cover it briefly here. The whole concept of free trade is that you want to eliminate as many barriers as possible between the businesses and peoples of different countries to trade with each other as openly and freely as they can. It's kind of like free market capitalism. Free market capitalism and free trade really go hand in hand. Let people naturally do what they're going to do business-wise, get the government out of the way and regulations out of the way, and therefore people will do what they do best. They will streamline their businesses and they will make the best products they can at the cheapest prices they can. And here's why that's important. Because when you have everybody doing what they do best at this most streamlined, most efficient, with the cheapest prices, those cheap prices get passed on to the consumer eventually. That's what you want, because when consumers get the cheapest products that are the best quality, they will buy more of them. And again, let me make a real example for you here. Bananas are cheap as hell in America. Like what, 40 cents a pound? And they've always been that way, and people eat the hell out of bananas. They always have. It's the number one eaten fruit in America because it's cheap as hell. It's good too, but it's cheap as hell. But what would happen if the price of bananas suddenly went to $100 a pound? Would you eat as much? Oh, hell no. You never monkey around with a banana again. That's too expensive. So when products are the cheapest to the consumers will buy more, and therefore the countries they're coming from can sell more, and everybody makes more money, more money, more money. That's what free trade is all about. Yeah! So why wouldn't that happen naturally? Why would you have to join a free trade bloc to ensure that's going to happen? What gets in the way of free trade? Mostly governments. They get in the way of everything. Governments have a tendency to do a word you should know called protectionism. Protectionism is when a government wants to protect the industries and businesses of their state at the expense of businesses and industries in other states. Now, they would do this for lots and lots of reasons I'm not going to go into here. Maybe it's a time of war, they have to protect their steel industry, or maybe there's an industry that employs 10 million people, so they have to protect it so it doesn't go out of business because then you have 10 million unemployed people and the government doesn't want that. I'm not going to get into all the reasons. I just want to get into two of the devices they have in order to do it. So what are the two ways that a government can protect its own industries? And this is at the expense of free trade, by the way. This is the opposite of free trade. Number one, they can put tariffs on imported goods. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Tariffs is just a fancy ass word for tax. Yeah, this is real tough stuff. So let's have a real world example here. Let's say the French produce lots of wine. They do. And let's just make up some numbers. Let's say a bottle of French wine costs $1. So they cost $1. They can import all the French wine they want to, and you get it on the Walmart shelf for $1. Now, if the U.S. gets really pissed at France, which happens all the time, we could levy a tariff on that French wine, a tax. And the U.S. government could say, guess what? Every French bottle of wine that comes in here, because we now have freedom fries and not the French fries, we're going to put a $5 tariff on all your stuff. So now that $1 bottle of French wine that people were buying last week for $1 is now going to cost $6. Whoa! That's going to wildly impact the consumer who says, I'm not going to buy that for $6. That's way too expensive. I'm out. I'm done. See how that works? So the U.S. can protect itself, protect its economy, and punish another economy if they want to by levying a horrific tariff or tax on imported goods. Now, sometimes it's because countries are at war with each other. They just hate each other. They make a political point that they use a tariff. But oftentimes it's to protect local industries. Let's say the U.S. wine industry couldn't compete as well with the Frenchies. The Frenchies have been doing a lot longer. They drink a lot more. They're all drunks. So the U.S. industry is not as good, and it would cost like $2 or $3 or $4 for the U.S. to make the same bottle of wine. Well, that tariff on the French wine also makes the U.S. wine industry more competitive. Does that make sense? Because their otherwise more expensive bottle of wine now can compete with a $6 bottle of French wine. There's another way, though, that a government can protect its industries and businesses much better, and that is something called subsidies. It's the second way of protectionism. And a subsidy is actually truly helping out the local business. The government of a state would help in a monetary way the businesses to thrive and succeed in their country at the expense of the businesses from other countries. And again, this is mostly monetary. And it mostly happens in the agricultural sector, by the way. So the U.S. grows hell tons of corn. And maybe China could produce corn cheaper. Maybe Ghana could produce corn cheaper. I mean, they have way cheaper labor, way cheaper cost. So it seems feasible that Ghana could produce cheaper corn and import it to the United States for cheaper. Well, the U.S. government wants to protect its corn industry, though. We want to keep those jobs, and we think it's vital that we have our own agricultural sector. So let's pretend, make up some numbers again, that a bushel of corn in Ghana costs just $1 to make. And they can import it to the U.S. for $1 a bushel. But the U.S. grown corn may actually cost $2 or $3 a bushel to make. Oh man, it's just like the bananas. People are going to buy the cheaper ones. So they're going to buy the cheap Ghana corn over the U.S. corn. It's the exact same corn. People are going to buy the cheap one. So the U.S. could put a tariff on the Ghana corn, or they could give U.S. producers a subsidy. Basically give them money every year and say, look, we want to make sure you guys stay in business, and we like you, and we protect our economic interest here. So we're going to give you $2.50 a bushel for every bushel you produce. Oh, kablamo! Now the American farmers can say, cool, we can now sell it. This cost us, $3 to produce a bushel. The U.S. government just gave us $2.50. So now we can take our corn to market and charge only 50 cents. And we can outbeat the Ghana corn, even though it only cost $1. That's the beauty of subsidies. That's how they work. Helping out your local business and basically making it more competitive so it can compete with the importers and the businesses from other countries. Get it? Now, this again happens mostly in the agricultural sector in today's world. This really pisses off less developed and poorer countries because one of the things they do for cheaper is agricultural products. But all the rich countries protect their farmers with the subsidies. They don't really do tariffs so much as the subsidies. Get what I'm saying here? So, all things being equal here, the governments of states can use protectionism to protect their own industries, artificially inflate prices for imports, or artificially lower prices for stuff produced in their own country in order for those businesses to compete. But that is the opposite of free trade, and that is kind of going away. We are in the free trade era where free trade has really proliferated. Now, there have been free trade pacts between countries forever, okay? Maybe the Brits get together with the Frenchies and say, hey, let's do this. Let's lower tariffs and get rid of regulations and subsidies between our two countries so that everybody gets the cheaper products and we all buy more and sell more and make more. Let's do that between our two countries. That's happened for a long time. What's kind of new in today's world is that it's kind of grown up to that many countries all get into this trade bloc and say, okay, let's do this collectively. Let's set the rules. We'll all sign up on the little charter. We all agree to follow the rules. We all have free trade. We get rid of regulations and subsidies between ourselves, and everybody now in this block can produce the stuff that they produce the best for the cheapest, so we can get cheap steel from this place and cheap cars from this place and cheap corn from this place, and we can export our cheap microchips or our cheap refrigerators, and everybody wins, everybody trades more. That's the essence of the trade bloc. The individual country-to-country trade blocks still exist, by the way. Anytime there's a country who's not in the block that you're in, but you still want to have some sort of relationship, you can have a free trade pact country to country. Like the U.S. right now has been working on a free trade pact with Colombia. It's an ally of ours. It's not in any other trade blocks that we're in, so we just have a one-to-one relationship with them to lower tariffs and regulations between the countries. That's how it works. Get it? Okay. Now, one or two more other terms here when we're speaking of trade before we wrap this up. Don't get confused by the terms trade imbalance, or positive trade balance, or negative trade balance. Just because you're in a free trade bloc, I mean, the whole damn world could be in a single free trade bloc playing by the same trade rules. But that doesn't mean that everybody makes the same amount of money. It's simply not going to happen. Some countries are going to sell more stuff. Other countries are going to have to buy more stuff. And trade imbalances occur country to country when you buy more stuff from a country than they buy from you, or vice versa. And when you buy more stuff from a country than they buy from you, that's called you having a negative trade balance. You're buying more, you're spending more money than you're making in sales. Make sense? If you sell more stuff to other countries than you buy from them, then you have a positive trade balance. And again, it's simple accounting, just like your checkbook. If you're writing more checks than you have income coming in, then you're negative. If you make more money coming in than checks you write, then you're positive. That's what trade balances are all about. It's got nothing to do, per se, with free trade. They can happen whether there's free trade occurring or not, all right? And let me give you a real world example on this one, too. Trade between the U.S. and Japan. Huge trade partners, have been for decades and decades and decades. However, the relationship has always been pretty negative for the United States because the United States buys tons of awesome vehicles from Japan, awesome video games from Japan, awesome anime from Japan. The U.S. market buys tons of stuff from Japan. Japan don't buy so much stuff from the U.S. I mean, the U.S. encourages it. They're like, come on, Japan, we buy lots of your cars. Why don't you buy lots of our cars? And people in Japan say, well, why would we do that? Our cars are better. And so the U.S. has a negative trade balance with Japan. Japan has a positive trade balance with the United States. See how that works? The big one in today's world, of course, is China. China has a positive trade balance with virtually everybody else in the world because China makes tons of shit and they sell all of it to everybody. And they don't buy that much stuff. And the stuff that they do buy, they buy raw commodities. So they buy, raw rubber and raw steel and raw this. And of course, you remember back to our economics lecture, that stuff from the primary sector is not worth as much. China buys all cheap stuff from other places, then refines it and processes it, makes it worth more money, and then sells tons of that shit to everybody else. So China has pretty much a positive trade balance with almost everybody because everybody's buying Chinese goods. But then the Chinese people don't really buy, say, American cars or American refrigerators or European finished goods. China really encourages everybody to buy Chinese stuff, which is why you hear even the U.S. government say, buy American. Come on, encourage the American economy. Do your part as American. Buy American. Because you want to keep that money in-house so you're not running negative trade balances with everybody. You're writing checks to everybody and you don't got enough income coming in. See how that works? Now, this situation can happen, as I've just described, because let's face it, some parts of the world make better products than they do in the United States anymore. So cars come in from Japan and the U.S. car market can't compete with that. They're just better products coming in from different places. That's why these imbalances occur sometimes. Sometimes they also occur for another word you should know called dumping. And you'll hear this in international news and economic news and financial news. What is dumping? Dumping occurs it is pushing the breaking the rules of free trade. If a country finds itself in a surplus of something that it makes, let's say steel. This happens all the time. You hear steel being dumped. Japan has a vibrant steel industry, and they make lots of steel. And if they accidentally have too much one year, they overproduced and they have a bunch of it sitting around and there's nowhere else to sell it on the market in Japan, they can actually take that steel and take it to America and dump it for half the cost that it is. It's like basically having like a sale at Walmart. Just slash the prices and therefore you dump it all in the American market, but that really pisses off all the steel producers in America who say, hey, what's the deal with this? This is bullshit. We have rules and regulations that say you can't do this. There are lots of anti-dumping rules, but it happens all the time anyway. anyway. People just want to move the goods and get them out of there. So that's another reason that trade imbalances can crop up, is dumping. Mostly it's competition, but also dumping. Now, there has arisen a international institution to deal with all these trade issues. And I know you've heard of it. Some of you have probably protested it. It's called the World Trade Organization, the WTO. It is, I wanted to point this out specifically here before we get to the trade blocks, because it's not really a trade block, not like the other ones we're going to talk about. It's more of a regulatory institution of which almost everybody is a member of. Right now, the WTO has 153 members, and that's out of 193 countries. So pretty much everybody is a member of the WTO. And it really is a regulatory agency in terms of making sure that everybody's following the rules. So everybody joins the WTO. Actually, you have to ask for permission to join, and some countries don't get in for a long time until they can clean up their act and promise to follow the rules. And these rules would approach things like talking about no dumping, and you can't do this, and you can't have illegal tariffs on imported goods. So once you can follow all these rules, you can be part of the World Trade Organization. And it's really in place not so much that it encourages trade between, say, the U.S. and Mexico on specific products, but it's there almost as a body which oversees all of this. And if you have a dispute, if you think a country's breaking the rules of free trade and they're a member of the WTO, then you can go to the WTO and complain, and actually go to the WTO and sue the other country that you think's breaking the rules. And there are hundreds and hundreds of outstanding cases in the WTO docket right now to catalog, okay, who broke the rules and how would we punish them? And again, once you've signed up in the WTO and said, I'm going to follow the rules, then you can be punished monetarily if you don't follow the rules. And I'll have this little trivial tidbit here. What country do you think has the most outstanding cases against other countries at the WTO? Huh? What country likes to sue people? What country likes to complain about every other country who's not following rules? Did you say the United States? You are absolutely right. The United States of America has the most outstanding kind of complaints at the WTO about other countries not following the rules, although the U.S. breaks the rules quite frequently itself too. Now, I bring up the WTO here because you hear a lot about it, and people protest it all the time. But it's really grown exponentially in the last several decades. Everybody wants to be a part of it, and I wanted to talk about why that is very quickly. Economically, speaking about the overall trend in the world for decades now, has been a steady march towards capitalism. And I'm talking globally here. And free trade. As the alternative systems that were experimented with around the world have crumbled, and I'm thinking mostly of all of the communist experiments all over the planet, from the Russians to the North Koreans to the Cubans, they've all kind of gone away. And socialist projects around the planet are also taking it on the chin a lot here lately too. And now I'm thinking of the European countries and Sweden and places with lots of social benefits. Those systems communism is gone. And even socialism is starting to dissipate in lots of parts of the planet. And capitalism and free trade has really reigned supreme and taken over. Some of the most successful international organizations on the planet are coalitions of countries working together in these free trade blocks, as already pointed out. So that's the groundwork for why economic blocks exist, and why the WTO has grown, and why these international organizations overall based on trade have grown, and why they are continuing to grow rapidly in the modern era. And also why economics is usually the foundation for international coalitions of all stripes, whether they exclusively deal with trade or have other things on their agenda. And I'm thinking specifically of the EU. The European Union was an international organization that was established for free trade. That was the first thing they started it as. But man, it's a whole hell of a lot more now, isn't it? I mean, they do all kinds of things. Many, including myself, say it's moving towards a United States of Europe. And that's kind of an economic / political and military and cultural combination. So almost all of the organizations we're going to talk about, even if they're not exclusively economic, usually have economics as part of what they do. So let's now turn to these organizations themselves and their evolution and see how they're growing and morphing in the modern era. Which ones will be the hottest? Which ones are going to be the largest? Which ones are the fastest growing? Which ones are evolving into something completely new? The main global institute for trade, I've now pointed out, the WTO. But the regional ones are the ones I'm going to focus on mostly at this point. And almost all regions around the planet have at least one main trade bloc that people are a member of. And again, some of them overlap. The main words we're going to look at here are ones like the EU or NAFTA, Mercosur, ASEAN, APEC. And then we'll also look at some economic entities that are not exactly trade blocs, but nonetheless are important to understanding how the global economy works.